I'm waiting on Trisha's decision about whether or not she'll allow me to go see her again. I don't know how long I can wait. She's really special to me, but life is lonely.
It started with one of those moments that makes every viewer lean in. Trisha stood in the studio, stomach knotted, and dropped the kind of news that flips the whole 90-day universe upside down. She was pregnant, but the twist that floored everyone wasn't just the timing, it was the paternity question. Her ex, Rick, who had been lobbying for a clean slate, wasn't the father. You could almost hear the record scratch in the audience's heads. All the tension, all the jealousy, all those late-night phone calls, suddenly every single one hit different. The stakes weren't just about a relationship anymore. Now, everything revolved around a coming baby, DNA doubts swirling, and a love triangle that nobody had mapped out in fantasy drafts. If you've followed Rick and Trisha before, you probably thought you'd seen all their messes, but last episode reset the bar. Rick, looking like he'd pulled an all-nighter on the Heartbreak circuit, was doing everything he could to convince Trisha he'd turned over a new leaf. Tears, promises, the whole package. He even threw out one of those classic grand gestures, saying he was willing to step up as a dad to the baby, no matter who the father was. Not everyone bought the performance, though. Friends, cast members, anyone on the couch with snacks and opinions felt that suspicious itch. Rick's track record isn't exactly the stuff of loyalty fairy tales. Even people who wanted to root for him found themselves bracing for trouble. But for Trisha, heartbreak doesn't go away overnight. Her face said what her words wouldn't. There was hope, mixed with pain, a little spark when Rick promised to change, but also the weight of every old betrayal. Here she was, carrying a child, no clarity about the future, and somehow still wishing things might end differently than last time. As she hesitated on air, you could see her mind flipping through all the possibilities. On one side, the old love story. On the other, a pile of broken trust and sleepless nights. While Rick begged for another shot, there was this weird electricity in the studio. He seemed almost frantic, clingy, like saying all the right things could performance manage his way back into Trisha's life. You could sense the desperation. In his words, he was a changed man. In his eyes, he still wanted to rewrite history, quickly, before Trisha could figure out what she deserved. Meanwhile, every tight-lipped cast member kept glancing at each other, waiting for today's chapter to knock the air out of the room. Watching it unfold, it's easy to joke about Rick's sudden devotion, but any viewer who's survived a breakup knows how raw hope and cynicism can fight for the last word. Trisha looked at Rick like she wasn't sure if she saw the old magic or just a rerun of last season's worst scenes. And underneath everything, the tension was building toward a boiling point. Trisha had secrets she was finally ready to share, and Rick had moves still coming that nobody expected. What happens next will shake up everything, not only for them, but for everyone who thinks they've got this couple all figured out. Everyone thinks they know how this ends, but the next reveal will shred whatever sympathy Rick has left. It all pivoted overnight. One moment, Rick was swearing to anyone who'd listen that he couldn't imagine his life without Trisha, even telling her he'd be there for her new baby, no matter what. The next, he was in a hotel, single for less than 24 hours, wandering out into the night. You know the kind of heartbreak that turns into wild energy? That's where Rick landed, freshly dumped, convinced he'd been wronged, and with zero intention of sitting alone and licking his wounds. Instead, he found another woman. Not weeks later, not even a few slow days of reflection. By the next night, Rick was in a bar, eyes scanning the scene, looking for distraction, or maybe validation, or both. And barely a pause for breath before he landed in bed with someone new. If you thought Rick's story couldn't get more chaotic, guess again. If you're wondering what went through Trisha's mind when she learned how fast Rick moved on, imagine reliving every vulnerable moment with the guy who promised he was different, only to find out he's off making new promises almost instantly. Jealousy hits different when you're already fragile. And that jealousy, in this case, isn't empty dramatics. This is a guy who used to lose it over Trisha's texts or glances at an ex. Now he's moved on faster than a trending meme, and somehow he's still suggesting he's the victim of circumstance. He explained his reasoning too, in that way only Rick does. In his version, it wasn't a calculated betrayal. He was lonely, heartbroken, and the next woman just happened to appear. Like fate sent him a test, and he failed with record speed. The story gets more theatrical with every retelling. One moment he's wallowing in his hotel room, next he's drawn out by the smell of fried chicken, and suddenly he's chatting up a new girl before he's even had a drink. There's almost a comedy to it, except it isn't funny for the ones picking up the shattered pieces. Viewers at home had that as the surreal moment. People like Rick talk about love like it's unbreakable, but their actions show how temporary their loyalty is. The double standard jumps out hard. Rick called Trisha dramatic and jealous when she mentioned old flames or new friends, but the moment he's single, the guardrails disappear. He claims it wasn't cheating because technically he and Trisha were over, but committed love doesn't vanish this fast unless it was already running on fumes. In my opinion, that timeline exposes the truth Rick never wanted to admit. But the real sting hits you when he tries to offer explanations instead of apologies. He says being alone scares him, like that erases the damage, as if fear gives you permission to toss out loyalty whenever things get hard. Some might say anyone can make mistakes, and fine. Life is messy. People struggle with loneliness, but Rick's pattern isn't messy so much as it's mathematically predictable. He always finds another hand to hold, and the excuses show up even quicker. Wait until you see what Trisha says next, because the heartbreak doesn't go only one way here. He didn't stop with a rebound either. The woman he met that night, a stranger over chicken and weak bar lighting, turned into a full 5-month relationship, overlapping emotionally and sometimes physically with his still fresh connections to Trisha. Trisha learns this on air, and you can feel the air go out of the room. This isn't a flirty message or an old flame lurking in the background. This is scientific proof that Rick cannot be alone, not even long enough to honestly mourn a relationship he claimed was his everything. All the "I've changed" speeches start to sound like script readings instead of real regret. Ready for the moment that makes everyone rethink Rick's story? Trisha found out that some of the romantic gestures Rick used to woo her, yes, even the infamous splash pad, were recycled from his previous relationship. No new moves, no new energy, just a man caught in a loop and dragging every woman with him. The more details came out, the more it looked like Rick had a playbook for breakups and rebounds, and loyalty wasn't even a footnote. Trisha's emotional pain sits quietly behind her eyes while Rick defends his choices, and it's brutal in its honesty. There's no big screaming match, no grand TV meltdown, just disappointment. Disappointment in Rick, in herself for hoping, in the cycle she feels trapped inside. Fans could see all those red flags waving, and the frustration bubbled online, people tossing out hot takes about moving on, loyalty, and knowing your own worth. If you've ever felt the punch of realizing someone only loves you until they find someone more convenient, this episode hits home hard. The shock isn't done, because what happens once these secrets come out will test every ounce of Trisha's trust, and Rick's response next isn't what anyone's expecting. After the truth about Rick's rebound broke, the internet wasted no time turning their outrage into pure spectacle. Social feeds, Reddit threads, and group chats everywhere filled up with memes and reaction GIFs. Fans clipped that moment Rick stammered about the chicken in the bar, replaying it with everything from actual fried chicken dancing on screen to, "Oh no, he didn't" side eyes. Trisha's supporters vented in all caps, dropping comments like, "Sis, he switched up like a Wi-Fi signal." Others simply posted, "If Heartbreak had a face, this would be it," next to a close-up of Trisha trying to hold it together. The Heartbreak went viral in hours. If you paused the episode to check Twitter, you'd see threads making bets on how quickly Rick would move on next. Some viewers invented nicknames for his new girlfriend, the legendary Chicken Lady, who instantly became an icon of rebound culture. People couldn't get over how Rick justified his moves, acting like loneliness was an excuse strong enough to erase loyalty. One sarcastic comment went, "So, if I eat chicken and get dumped, I get a boyfriend now? That's how it works." The memes, the jokes, the hashtags, they all pointed back to the same thing. This was more than messy. This was a personality trait on public trial. As the episode kept rolling, The feedback loop between live TV drama and online audience hit a fever pitch. Fans demanded accountability. Some roasted Rick for moving on so quickly, saying, "Blink and you'll miss his next relationship." Others took aim at his excuses, turning anxiety about being alone into the punchline for every other tweet. But a handful tried for empathy, pointing out that people act wild in the aftermath of heartbreak, even if Rick's timeline looked more like a sprint than a stumble. Still, those voices were drowned out by the shock over his 5-month relationship with the chicken lady. Right when you think you've heard it all, the overlap comes out, and the betrayal feels sharper. Rick didn't just rebound, he kept the new flame burning while still sending signals to Trisha. Split screen, split loyalties, split-second decisions with zero reflection. Suddenly, every flashback of him promising a future with Trisha had a bitter aftertaste. On screen, Trisha blinked and processed the humiliation live. The studio got quiet. Even the usually rowdy cast looked like they were triple-guessing every side of this mess. Questions started flying, not only online, where viewers love to weigh in, but right there in the studio. Would you ever trust Rick again after this? If you were Trisha, would you let him back in, or would you slam that emotional door and double-lock it? The answers came fast and brutally honest. Most people said no way. There were a few soft-hearted souls, but even they looked nervous about their own optimism. For Trisha, the pain wasn't just about Rick's new relationship or even the speed. It was realizing how deeply she had confused loyalty with hope, how many warning signs she'd tried to rationalize away. While fans kept asking who's at fault, one thing stood out: Rick's habit of rewriting history to fit whichever woman is closest. He tried to say he'd told the chicken lady all about Trisha from day one, but nobody in the audience felt convinced. He'd reframe every step to sound innocent, but actions undercut words every time. That's when a fresh twist landed, heavier than any chicken-related punchline so far. Turns out, Rick's not only recycled his romance moves, he's been spinning his story so fast he can barely keep track. While juggling Trisha and the chicken lady, he also kept in touch with another ex, the one he allegedly cheated with before. Suddenly, the timeline of heartbreak and healing looked more like a tangle of overlapping DM threads and half-truths. Trisha and fans alike were left doing mental math, trying to figure out when, exactly, if ever, Rick was truly single or honest with anyone. Online, the conversation shifted as people realized this wasn't just about a messy rebound. This pattern looked almost strategic. Rick, in my opinion, gets more invested in new attention than he ever was in fixing old mistakes. The current drama became a kind of group project, with fans dissecting every clip, hunting for early signs this was bound to happen. Some viewers even started dropping their own stories of dating people like Rick, turning the episode into a confessional about how hard it is to let go of toxic cycles. The new dilemma for Trisha hangs in the air, stripped of denial, sitting with the humiliation, and still carrying a baby whose father isn't even present. Does she hold onto the ghost of a love story, or cut her losses before Rick's next move catches her in the crossfire? The choice no longer feels abstract. It's a living heartbreak, raw and unresolved, with no reset button. Each minute that passes on screen, you can sense Trisha shifting, leaning closer to freedom, but fighting that old hope that Rick might finally get it right. Trisha stared down the barrel of one of the hardest choices a person can face, caught in that fragile space between her past and the future taking shape inside her. The studio buzz had faded, comments had cooled, but the decision still pressed on her chest like a boulder. She felt it every quiet morning, the moments when hope and heartbreak wrestled in the back of her mind. Motherhood was now real, living and growing, impossibly close and yet out of reach of all the mess Rick had dragged her through. She woke up some days missing the old dream, but other days she just wanted peace, the kind that sticks, the kind nobody can take away. Anyone who has loved someone who couldn't love them the way they deserve knows how many false starts you replay in your head. Trisha's story is built on reruns of apologies, empty promises, and a carousel of second chances. She spent months believing in change, holding tight to the idea that love can fix anything if you just hang on long enough. But time and life wear out even the strongest optimism. The news about Rick's lightning speed rebound left her raw, the timeline of new relationships and broken trust playing on a loop in her head. She knew the world was watching, and that made it worse somehow, pain turning into performance, embarrassment multiplied by 1,000 online voices. It would be easy to hate Rick, but Trisha never did. There's a heartbreaking kind of empathy in her voice when she talks about him, as if she's still searching for the hurt child behind all that chaos. She saw the pain that made him desperate for connection, flinching at silence, running from loneliness faster than he ever ran toward loyalty. For a long time, she tried to be his safe place, thinking she could heal someone who didn't want to stop bleeding. Now she stood in a new season of her life, forced to choose, keep clinging to the past, or bet on her own strength for once. But the echoes of old habits don't die easy. She found herself picking up the phone some nights, staring at Rick's contact, thumb hovering but never pressing send. Old routines tease like they never left. Should she let him try again? Should she believe him, this time for real, when he says he wants to step up? Watchers at home recognize the hesitation. Once you've been through the spin cycle of second chances, it's harder to spot when it really is the end. The pain stretched further than sadness. It bled into anger, into stubbornness, into defiance. Trisha replayed Rick's words, how quick he was to swear he would wait for her, then race into someone else's arms when patience got rough. The grand gestures feel smaller, the memories faded with each reveal of recycled romance moves and borrowed lines. She started to see the story not as a love affair gone wrong, but as a lesson she was tired of repeating. She started to ask bigger questions about herself, what kept her hooked, even when she knew better. How much energy was she pouring into hope, and how much more could she put toward her own healing instead? People talk about red flags, but for Trisha, they weren't warnings, they were love notes at first. Every instinct telling her to run was written off as insecurity, every gut feeling buried by hope. She remembered all the little things, a missed call here, a frantic trip to Colombia there, the way Rick dodged questions or turned jealousy into jokes. What had seemed romantic in the panic of new love now felt unmistakably like warning signs, and the twist of hindsight was cruel. Still, growing up is mostly about learning to trust your own intuition, especially when it tells you things you wish weren't true. Online, fans who'd cheered for Trisha felt a shift. Messages poured in, some urging her to forgive and move on, others begging her not to let another changed man speech pull her back into old pain. The fanbase split into camps overnight, one group hoping for redemption, another ready to rally around her independence. Sometimes, being the center of a reality show isn't about the story you tell, but the story the world wants you to live. All those opinions were loud, but only one would matter, her own. Every day, Trisha's pregnancy gave her the clearest reason to choose herself. The urge to focus on her child outweighed any fear of being alone. The idea of inviting Rick back into her life meant exposing her future and her baby to a cycle that had spun out for too long. Still, pain makes people unpredictable. Hope pulls hard. She wondered if maybe Rick really was changing, or at least trying. After all, everyone has their breaking point, and sometimes love stories look messy before they become something solid. Rick was quick to sense where he stood, and he did what he always did, try to slip back in before the door could shut. Promises rained down, those now familiar lines about regret and growth. He played the underdog, swearing that this time really was different. In a softer moment, anyone would hope he meant it. But every pattern in Rick's story, every late-night message, every "I'm lost without you," played out for the cameras and the audience before. No matter how many lines he rehearsed, the hurt never faded from Trisha's face. This is the moment where everything hangs in the balance. If Trisha closes the door, there's a finality to it, an open road ahead for her and her child, a break in a cycle she's lived for too many seasons. But the real world is messy. Sometimes, hope wants the last word, even when reality has spoken again and again. Will she let herself believe one more time? Will she risk her peace for another spin on the same ride? The answer isn't clear to anyone, maybe not even to Trisha yet. The next choice she makes will not only define her, but ripple out to everyone who still hopes broken people can change. That choice isn't easy, and as long as she hasn't made it, the door remains cracked, the story still unfinished, the final decision both urgent and impossibly far away. Rick's last words on set landed with the worn-out echo of every apology we've heard before. Promising patience, promising change, swearing he'd wait as long as it took, if only Trisha would give him just one more shot. But that tired old hope was starting to crumble. He insisted he wasn't with anyone else, that Trisha's decision would be his North Star, but nobody in the room looked convinced. Not after the fast-forward romance with the chicken lady, not after every recycled love move. Even Rick's body language told another story, glancing around, restless, already leaning toward his next distraction. The truth was easy to see now. Rick wasn't built for waiting. The same loneliness he claimed drove him back to Trisha would probably nudge him into a new relationship before the credits roll. Some people need company the way others need air, but when company means jumping from heart to heart, what's left for anyone but confusion and wounds that heal crooked? Trisha's journey had proved, again and again, that second chances with Rick always came at a cost: her peace, her pride, and now, the security of her future child. At this point, Trisha's energy had shifted. That sense of longing for a rescue was gone, replaced by a steady focus on what matters most. You could see it in her face. No more bargaining with herself. No more trying to fix the unfixable. She talked about her baby with a joy that was bigger than all of Rick's apologies put together. The old cycles may have pulled her back in the past, but something about impending motherhood had put everything into sharp perspective. Every friend, every fan, even some castmates could feel that energy, and it was contagious in the best way. But with Rick out of the picture, at least for now, all that open space feels both scary and thrilling. Viewers start to imagine what these next chapters might look like for Trisha. No more midnight phone calls. No more holding her breath waiting for apologies. She has the time, the attention, and the love to invest in her baby and in healing herself for real. The fan base is rallying behind her in new ways, rooting for her first joyful milestone as a new mom. For the first time, her future seems unwritten. By Rick, by heartbreak, by bad patterns. Every step Trisha takes now, viewers are watching, hoping she keeps moving forward. Her next move isn't about winning Rick back or proving him wrong. It's about building trust with herself, about not letting someone else's chaos define her worth or her family's story. The cycle doesn't get to spin forever. Sometimes you have to be the one who stops it. Once Trisha steps into this new season of life, her choices will send out their own waves, some strong, some so gentle they'll take time to register. The drama with Rick may have given her grief, but it also handed her clarity. She stands at the edge of motherhood, knowing she's not just starting over. She's starting better. People will talk, fans will speculate, and Rick will probably send more messages. But in this moment, Trisha has the one thing the show can never script: real control over her own story. The suspense now isn't about Rick's next move. It's about Trisha making a choice for herself, for her baby, for a kind of happiness that never needed heartbreak as its price. This time, viewers aren't just waiting for the next betrayal. They're watching for the first real sign of freedom. But what Trisha does next isn't what anyone's expecting. Don't miss what happens when she finally takes back control.